I hope so. Oh, my computer is saying that we're not. Okay, we are. All right, so tonight we're going to talk about start building your real estate portfolio. Hey, beautiful bosses. My name is Tashawna Nicole. I'm the owner of Pumps and Profit. And we have been doing a series for the past 4 weeks with showing you a little bit more about the real estate industry. Now we're going to move into helping you build that real estate portfolio. So if you have any questions, you already know, drop it in the chat. If you're watching me on Instagram, DM me, my love. I would love to hear. And then, of course, if you really want a strategy specifically for you, then book a real estate review session. Okay, so we are going to get started. Tonight, we're going to talk about what to do before you even start investing. You hear my little man in the back. The second thing we're going to talk about is the 3 popular methods to start building your real estate portfolio, and how you can get started today. We're figuring out how you can build your real estate portfolio. So I'm excited about this series. So it's going to be a 3-part series in building your real estate portfolio. And so in the next couple of weeks, we'll go a little bit more into what those strategies look like, and some different ways that you can build that $1 million portfolio. All right, so tonight, before I even start, I want to say this. You got to take ownership, right? You got to take ownership of not only your future, your present, as well as just taking ownership of your finances. And this is very necessary. He's talking back with me. This is very necessary when it comes to building your portfolio. So the reason why you want to mind your business in terms of that is owning your future, owning your finances, and owning your present, is because this is what's needed, whether you're a business owner, whether you're just trying to get out of debt and become, financially free, or you want to build a real estate portfolio. And so we're going to kind of dive into that in the 3 areas that we talked about. And so before you even get started, you got to own your future. Now, because when it comes to owning your future, some of us have decided this is what it's going to be, and this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life, right? But if that's not you and you want to own your future, you got to know where you are starting at, right? So before you even decide to do anything, you got to have a plan. You got to have a strategy in place and what that looks like, right? Before you can actually take action. So same thing with real estate. You got to decide what you want to do in order to get started in building that portfolio. So you got to decide what types of properties, right, am I going to acquire? Because depending on the type of property, there is different things that you're going to have to do to acquire those properties, which means it's either going to be considered residential or commercial. And this is very important. Why? Because if you are buying anything like a single family or a duplex, triplex, or quadruplex, then you can go residential. But if you're buying 5 to 8 units, hotels, commercial, you're going to have to go commercial. And so there's a difference. You got to decide what that looks like for you, right? So you can be able to acquire loans, as I said, all the way up to a 4-plex with a residential loan. But when you start talking about commercial, that means you're going for the big boys. But here's the great thing about commercial. You can even buy a single family residence as commercial, right? And so you got to decide, okay, what am I going to start with and what's really going to build me out? And so those ways that you can be able to do it is going to be deciding, okay, am I going to start residential and move my way to commercial, or am I going to start strictly commercial, which means you're putting everything under a business entity, okay? And we talked about that in a past live where you decide, is that going to be an LLC? Is that going to be a corporation? Are you going to be a sole proprietor? right? So you got to make that decision and talk to a professional, tax professional that can allow for, in a lawyer, either one or both, that can allow you to be able to position yourself to win, okay? So usually you see a lot of individuals start an LLC. Why? Because that allows for you to have pass-through income and or expenses, right? So if you go net profit, if you think about it, if you lose money, that's money. And I'm not going to touch too much on this, but let's say, you know, you happen to lose money that month, it can allow for your tax bill to be lower, but you don't want, you know, there's some things that you just don't want to take off or write everything off, because you will get audited, honey. Trust me, they will audit you. But usually you'll see individuals start an LLC when it comes to real estate, because they're able to put that on their personal tax returns as a Schedule C, and it shows as income and or a net deficit profit, right? So corporation, you know, you usually double tax because you got your corporation, then you got dividends. So now you're getting taxed on both of those, and then you might want to hire yourself. So it's talk to a professional, all right? If that's a way that you want to go and you really want to take your business seriously. But if you're just starting out, you can start with yourself, all right? And you can put that still on your income taxes, but of course you want to be protected. And so usually individuals would do an LLC, but you got to decide, right, the type of properties. And this is where owning your future comes in, because you have to make the decision where you want to start. And you may say, I don't know where to start, right? So if you want to start single family residences, that means it's a detached or an attached building. That's where a single family may live. Or if you have a basement or second apartment that's on that land, now you got, you know, two families maybe living there, but usually is one family that's usually in that single family residence. If you want to do multifamily, there's a difference. You can go up to 4 units when you're doing residential. Now 5+, now you're talking commercial. All right. And the reason why they have it to where you can acquire up to a 4 unit, I don't make the laws. This has been in the laws for the longest, as long as I've been in real estate, right? But residential can allow for you, being able to get a residential loan can allow for you to kind of put your foot in the game if you want to get, you know, a duplex, a triplex, or a quadruplex. You can still be able to get a residential loan, which means that you can use either your personal income or the rental income from that unit. And we talked about that in the previous episodes where we talked about, you know, using that rental income in order to allow for that to be the qualifying income for that loan. And so that's the DSCR program that we talked about, okay? Now, when it comes to commercial, don't feel scared about it. It's pretty much really still around the same process. You're still going to be the guarantor on that loan, but what happens is, even though your credit score is taken into account, which allows for them to know, you know, how much you can qualify for, it goes to your business name, which means your business entity owns that property. And you're the guarantor, which means you are responsible for that loan. Okay. Your business is going to own it, but you are responsible for making sure that loan is paid as an individual. I like commercial because, as I said, even with the business, it protects you. That's the main thing here. Okay. You want to have that protection. And so when you go commercial, usually, the majority of lenders will want you to put that into a business name, okay? And you cannot be living there. And we're going to kind of talk about that a little later, about which loan you want to go with. if you're living in that property, okay? But if you are going commercial, you cannot live in that property. All right, so that's the difference kind of with residential. Residential, you can live there and you can rent out a room. You can live there and have someone in your basement, right? That's called border income or still rental income, okay? And that's where the deciding comes in. As a boss, because I know you are a boss watching this, okay? You are a boss. So I know for you, you have to make the decision what that looks like for you, how you want to build that out. So the bigger the property, the more money or investors that you may have to bring in on that property. And we'll kind of dive into different ways of acquiring money in our part 3. Okay, so I'm not going to dive into that tonight. And here's the thing: when you own your future, you can start by acquiring properties under your personal name, right? And then switch it over to your business. But why not go ahead and get an LLC? It's very simple. Go to your Secretary of State, apply for your LLC, talk to a professional. Of course, I'm not a professional in that, I learned it in school, but there's people that do that all day, every day, right? But you can, and I'm just using LLC as an example, but you can be able to start your LLC and then be able to then get your EIN number. You go to irs.gov. That's free, okay? Your EIN, after you get your LLC, you get your EIN, and then boom, baby, you're ready to go. And I do want to throw this little tidbit in really quickly. I hope you pick up what I'm throwing down, okay? Here's the thing. If you have a loan, and you can go residential, even with your business name, when you're doing what is the DSCR loan, okay? So you do have the opportunity to go residential and still put that into your business name. There's just some paperwork on the back end that we make sure that we have to show, hey, this property is going from this person's business, personal name to their business. So you still have that option to transition it. And let's say you already own the property through a refinance. Okay. So I'm gonna throw it one more time at you, catch it. You can acquire properties personally, and you can always refinance those properties that are now being rented out into your business name. Okay. So you got to own your future. How you get in is not how you have to end. Okay. Just get in the game. All right. So the next thing I want to talk to you about is really owning your money, right? And when you think about owning your money, this is taking ownership of generational wealth. Right? You don't have to just build your portfolio with real estate, right? That's the main thing that we're concentrating on. But that portfolio can consider real estate, you investing in businesses that allow you to acquire dividends. It can have stocks in it. It can be able to allow for you to have businesses. This is a portfolio where you have to make the decision today how this looks for you, how tomorrow looks for you. What do you want to leave behind for your family? That is you owning your money. Okay, so you got to decide what that looks like for you. So there's 3 popular ways that you can be able to own your money and acquire money either on a monthly basis and or in lump sums. So let's talk about it, right? The 2 primary ways that you're going to see money coming to you in real estate is cash flow or a lump sum, and or both. Okay, so let's talk about it. Cash flow. You're usually going to see cash flow come whenever you are renting a property, right? So every month that property is bringing you cash flow. I love cash flow properties. Why? Because it essentially replaces your income. Okay. Also with cash flow, the money you may put into a real estate investment, right? So I was just having a talk with my mom today about something that I'm working on in terms of, real estate investors being able to invest in so they can acquire cash flow on a monthly basis, right? This is something that you can do with a rental property. If this is something that's more up your alley, like my mom, we're working on building out her wealth portfolio. She loves cash flow. So of course, that's going to be the main central theme of her wealth portfolio is cash flow. So you can be able to acquire that whether you are the investor of that property or you are the owner of that property to where now you're getting that cash flow coming in. Okay. And usually with that, there's two of the popular methods that's going to allow for you to have cash flow. That's going to be when you buy and hold, which means you acquire the property and you hold it and you rent it out. And then there's house hacking, which means you may live on the top floor and you rent out your basement, or vice versa. Or you may rent out a room. That's allowed for you to house hack where you still living in the home, but you're acquiring income from that property. All right, so those are usually the two main popular ways that you can be able to get cash flow. Say it again, buy and hold, which means you acquire the property and you hold it, or you can be able to do it through house hacking. All right, so that's essentially allowed for you to do that cash flow. Now, when it comes to lump sum, okay, usually what you'll see individuals do when it comes to acquiring lump sums from real estate is fix and flips, okay, and wholesaling, right? So I'm not going to go into those two, I'm not going to go in depth, but I'm going to just tell you a little bit about what those are, okay? So fix and flip means that you acquire the property and you do renovations within the property and you put that property back on the market. And that means essentially you fix it and now you're flipping it to make some money. And usually with that, there's some good deals out there where you can replace your whole year income off one fix and flip, or allow for you to be able to get that lump sum so you can go and buy another property. All right. And what I like about fix and flips is, as I say, you can get a lump sum of money to go and either acquire a property that you can now rent out, or go and flip another property again and get more income. Get more cash on hand by flipping that property again. One of the strategies, I remember years ago, I was watching an individual who they use fix and flip and they use buy and hold as a strategy, right? So they were saying how one of the things that you can that they love about fix and flips is that they would do 3 fix and flips and make about net profit, $100,000, right? And that's not saying guarantee. I'm not guaranteeing you 100,000 or anybody else. With real estate, there's always a risk, just like stocks, business, and anything else, okay? But they acquired these properties, they fixed it, flipped it, right? So they then had $100,000 in their account where they took that money and now bought another, a bigger property, I think like a multi-family property, and now they were able to cash flow, right? And so here is one of the ways that they were able to cash flow and lump sum off that property. And we'll talk about that, that particular method. We will not talk about it until next week, okay? So I'm not going to go fully into this method, but I'm going to essentially tell you what it is. So they took the property, they rented it out, they renovated it, rented it out, and then refinanced it. So now they was cash flowing and they had a lump sum all in one. This is something that you can do when you're house hacking as well as buying, holding. Okay, and that's what they did. They fixed and flipped 3, and they bought buy and hold 1. and they was able to cash flow off of that. What I love about that is that you're able to acquire a lump sum of money and then use a portion of that to be able to qualify for certain loans, because now you have the reserves to be able to purchase that, right? And this is where owning your finances come in. Because if you understand how to count, like my millionaire mentor used to say, if you know how to count, you can make some money. If you do not know how to count, and I'm not talking about 1 + 1, I'm talking about being able to really count money. And that is accounting. If you know how money works, you can make money. Simple as that. Okay. You can print your own money if you know how it works. And so that's my whole goal here, is to show you that real estate, you can essentially print your own money. Why? Because you are giving individuals a home to live in, and then in return for that value, they are paying you for that value. And that's how money works. It's a currency. It goes, it flows, right? And so those 3 popular methods, fixing and flipping, buying and holding, house hacking, these are 3 ways that you can really get in the market very quickly. And I threw in an extra one, I think I said wholesaling, right? But essentially, these are 3 ways that you can be able to really get in the market very quickly and start building your portfolio right now. All right. So just to refresh before I go on to this 3rd point, because this, I want you to take your pens and paper out on this 3rd one when we start going into this one. But you got to decide what type of properties you want to acquire, right? So you may say, I want to start with single family, then I want to go and get a duplex, then I want to get a quadruplex, then I want to do commercial, or you may want to do all single family residences. So you got to decide what type of properties you want to acquire. It's just like business, niche down so that you can be laser focused on that one thing. For me, this is something that I love to do. So for instance, for me, I love cash flow. Okay. But I know that fix and flipping will allow for me to be able to acquire more properties, which essentially allows for more cash flow to come in. So me knowing what that looks like for me, I can create a portfolio or my strategy and plan that allows for me to do just that. Okay. So you got to decide what type of properties is going to allow for you to do that. Just decide. All right. If you say, hey, I want to get in the game and get 4 properties at 200, that value at 250,000, right? You got $1 million portfolio. Don't overthink it. I want to get 10 $100,000 properties. You had $1 million. Okay. So just decide. You don't have to do that. You may say, I want to get one apartment building, $1 million apartment building with 8 units. Right. So just decide what type of properties do you want to acquire over time to build your portfolio. Then you want to be able to choose some methods, right? So I gave you 3. You can start by fixing and flipping, buying and holding, and house hacking. You can use your own house and rent out a room. You can use your own house, rent out a basement, right? We've done it. Love it because it allows for you to be able to use that. Actually, you can use that border income whenever you're applying for a loan. All right. There's like 50 different ways. There's 50 different like income, probably more than that, but it's a whole slew of different incomes that you can use to qualify and use to qualify for a certain amount of money. All right. So you got to decide, what are the methods I'm going to use to build my portfolio? Is it going to be fixing and flipping? Is it going to be buying, holding? Is it going to be house hacking? And I have 6 different ones. So we'll go over those next 3 in part 3 on building ways to build your portfolio. Okay. We're going to talk more on the funding side in part 3 of this. So decide what type of properties, decide how you're going to do that, right? You don't have to know the strategies completely, research it, of course, but just get a general idea. Rewind this again, hashtag replay, okay? And go back and say, okay, I want to do buy and holds. What does that look like, right? And so we're going to get into that right now, all right? So you want to get started with building your real estate portfolio. You have to decide how you are going to do that, right? So you decided, this is my future. This is what it looks like. Now you got to own your present. What type of situation are you in now? This works whether you're in business or real estate. You have to assess where you are right now. Because if you're able to assess where you are now, then now you can start building that roadmap of what that looks like. Okay? So in order to get started, you want to first create a timeline. How far are you willing to take this portfolio? You don't have to stop at $1 million. You can keep going, honey. This is just I'm just giving you a base, okay? But the timeline, how long are you looking to build out this portfolio, right? This $1 million real estate portfolio. Is it going to take you 3 years? Is it going to take you 5 years? You don't have to think in terms of, no, I need this done in a year. If you want to do it in a year, baby, you can do it, right? But it may, depending on your situation, it may take you longer, it may take you shorter. You just got to be on it, right? Not saying that you can't get it done, you can get it done. You may say, I want to take 5 years because I want to learn how to really build this business out. I want to be able to do certain things. I don't always want to do a property, right? So you got to understand what is your timeline and how that looks with fitting in with your lifestyle. All right. Another thing that you're going to have to consider right now is reserves. Who can you get money from? How much can you acquire? And how much do you already have? Just like business, you got to be resourceful when it comes to building your dreams. One thing about what I love about entrepreneurship is that being resourceful means that you got to think outside of the box. Every way is a good way, the way I see it. There's always a solution. There's always a way. I'm an optimistic person because I'm going to find a way. If I can't do it that way, fine. I'm going to find another way. It's just like math. There's so many different ways that you can solve a problem. Life and business and real estate is the same way. There's so many different ways. And you have to first, like I said, got to know where you at. And so this is where knowing how much you have, can you borrow it from somebody? Do you have access to it? Do you have a way to where you already can acquire a certain amount of capital for your down payment and your closing costs? So write that down. First, you should have your timeline at the top. I built my $1 million portfolio in 5 years. In 2028, I'm bringing in $10,000 a month, and I have $1 million portfolio that I'm now leaving for my family. Right? That's a timeline. That's your goal. Okay. Then resources, real reserves. Write down, okay, where can I get some money from? Okay. So you should have your timeline. I just gave you what you should say. Hey, I got my $1 million portfolio in 3 years. I acquired it in a year, whatever that looks like. Right. Then this is how I know I can go get some money. List as many as you can. I mean, as many as you can, right? Because as you're building this portfolio, you know that these are different touch points that you can go and acquire some money. And these individuals can be able to go in deals with you. They can be able to be a part of your company and y'all work together. Just so many different ways. Or they could just be somebody that loaned it to you. You got to pay it back. Right? So think about, how can I get my hands on some money? Now, disclaimer, if you go and start applying for credits, I would suggest working with a credit professional, because in real estate, one of the things we talked about it, I think in episode 2 or 1, I can't remember, go back. But we talked about credit. I think it was in the first episode. Credit. That is determination, how much you can get. All right, your loan to value. It matters, especially in personal. It matters in business, because that also lets you know how much you can acquire. So it's very important. Work with a credit professional so that you don't jack your credit up, applying for everything, and then your credit score is down in the drain because you don't apply for all of these credit cards and things like that. Okay. So take heed on that. Money matters, but you gotta goes back on your finances, right? So you got to know what that looks like for you, and how you can be able to shape structure your portfolio to make sure you're winning each and every time. All right. So timeline, when are you going to do it? Reserves. How much can you get your hands on? Who can you get it from? Do you already have it? What's some ways besides pulling credit that you can get that money? Okay. Then consider your monthly income. So this kind of goes into part 2, the reserves part, but your monthly income can also play into that. Because let's say that you want to, do the buy and hold or the house hacking. So you can buy the property and rent out a room. Now you got to live there depending on the type of loan you get, but you can use the house hacking method by using your personal income. Or if you make enough and you have low monthly debt, then you can also be able to acquire a investment property with just based off of your income. And so that's where that personal or business kind of comes in, that strategy. Do I want to use my personal so I can use my income that I have? Or do I want to build my monthly income in terms of being able to save it so I can get money? That matters, right? So you got to understand, if you don't want to use your monthly income, then there's going to be creative ways that you can get access to reserves and be able to use certain products to where you don't have to necessarily use your monthly income. But take into account, do you make enough to be able to acquire another property or your first property? Before I move on, I want to say this. Every year as a loan officer, you have to take continuing education classes, right? And I am so fired up, but so heartbroken, because how many of us are out here paying a certain amount in rent, and it's taking up, a pretty good chunk of your money every month. For instance, in California, they have 3 million people in California, 3 million, that are paying 30% of their income to their rent. And I think like 2 million of them are paying 50% of their income to rent. And so it got me thinking, because if you are a renter and you feel like, man, I'm paying a lot to rent. And we talked about it last week about renting, owning, or investing and what that looks like. And sometimes, you got to see, and I said it last week, you got to really see where you at and what you can qualify for, right? You can't just assume if you assume that you can't get anything, if you're paying for a house, right? I mean, you're renting and you're paying a certain amount of money and it's astronomical. Who says that you can't afford a house that's around that same price? And I get it. Sometimes, you know, you love where you stay, it's comfortable, things like that. I'm not knocking you. But my thing is, if you're paying 50% of your income to rent or 30% of your income to rent, there's programs out there that will allow for you to do affordable housing, which is 30% of your income for that home. So knowing where you stand is going to matter, because I don't want, if you are a renter right now, like I said, I don't knock you if that's your choice at all. I don't. And to see those statistics that, first of all, 3 million people, we having a 3 million housing crisis where ain't nobody got nowhere to live, right? 3 million deficit of homes that people have nowhere to live. And so the obvious choice is that they're renting. And that rent, because you may be paying just as much to rent, who says you couldn't afford that in a home? Have you ever tried to apply? Have you ever talked to someone? So seeing that lets me know two things. People don't mind renting, which means, honey, you can acquire some houses and get it rented out. But also the individual that want to buy, you now have the opportunity to put yourself in position to be that landlord or that property manager, okay? It makes some money for people that just rather rent. So I thought that was interesting that, and that was just California. I know this is happening nationwide. I know it is. And there's people that, like I said, they just rather rent because of the flexibility. No problem at all, buddy. No problem at all. All right. And so that brings me to my fourth one, right? So we said timeline, reserves, monthly income. And now let's talk about rental versus lump sums. And we kind of talked about this because this is cash flow versus lump sum. So we know lump sum, you can usually do fix and flips with that. You can do buy and hold where you're getting cash flow and lump sum. You can do house hacking where you get cash flow and lump sum. But when you're thinking about renting and getting that rental income, right? You also got to decide, if you decide to go the cash flow route, are you going to be the property manager, or are you going to hire a property managing company? Sometimes this can be 15-20% of your profits, right? So that's something you got to factor in. And not saying that, but you don't want to be where you ain't making no money, okay? So you got to factor those things in. You got to decide, okay, if I decide I want to do mainly cash flow and I'm going to hold these properties, am I going to be the property manager or I'm going to hire somebody, right? So you got to make that decision. When you own your present, when you own your future, and you own your finances, you can be able to create that roadmap. But you first got to know not only where you want to head to, but you also got to know where you're going to start. Because when you know those two, now you can create your roadmap of how you're going to get from point A to point B. All right, so that may be, I'm going to do mainly single family residences. I want to have some duplexes where I have multiple individuals renting out my units. I want to go straight commercial, and I'm going to have a property manager manage it because I just want to see the checks every month. Right? So if you know what that is, as I said before, you can be laser focused on exactly doing that, because you know what you want and you want to know, and you know how you're going to get there. So now it's about creating that strategy of how you're going to do each of those, which is why I said you got to start from where you are. Because when you know what that is, then you know how you can maneuver. Is it going to be less money for me to do a fix and flip? Or is it going to be less money for me to buy a unit and rent it out? Is it going to be less money is it going to be more beneficial for me if I partner with somebody? Or is it going to be more beneficial for me to get somebody I can get a lump sum from and I can acquire this property, refinance and cash them out? So as I said, there's so many different ways that you can really be able to build this portfolio, but it's up to you what that looks like. So decide what the end game looks like. Decide and write down your timeline, your reserves. Do I have the income? Do I want to rent or do I want to just keep getting this money? And when you decide that, now you can move forward. What's the first step I'm going to do? Because I know what the future looks like. I know where I'm headed. But what does this first step looks like for me? Once I do that, now let me do the next step. Don't overwhelm yourself trying to think of every little step on the way. You have an idea. Now it's time to execute. You can go get that money, honey. If you really wanted to get the money, you know how to get it. So go get it. You know what properties you've been looking at in your backyard that you know if you got that property, you know what you can rent it out for. Go get it. You got it. So go get it. All right, beautiful bosses. Next week, I am looking forward to it. We're going to dive more into what that $1 million portfolio looks like. And we're going to talk strategy next week, right? If you're going to acquire that single family, that multi-family, I cannot wait till next week. Make sure you join me and make sure you slay every day with style. All right, beautiful boss. Until tomorrow, I see you.